Hello YouTube, I am Solo Chinchilla. This is my complete Resto Druid guide right here. As you can see, I am on my Resto Druid. I'm going to be covering stat priority, talents, gear. So first I'm going to cover the talents. These are the talents that I use for PvE. The first tier, level 15, you could go with Wild Charge or Feline Swiftness, but I do prefer Feline Swiftness because Wild Charge, you're just going to fly to an ally's position, and it's going to be on a 15-second cooldown. So Feline Swiftness is just that nice passive movement speed buff that you're not going to have to worry about. And Displacer Beast, I have not seen any Resto Druids using it. I don't know what it would be good for. Well, Tier 2, Nature Swiftness, Renewal, and Cenarian Ward. Nature Swiftness is pretty much your go-to big heal spell. You can macro Nature Swiftness and Healing Touch. Renewal, you're a Resto Druid, you don't want to be healing yourself unless, you're taking a lot of damage. You're going to be one healing your team. So Nature Swiftness is going to help you drop those big heals. Cenarian Ward is really, it's just for leveling. Let's read this. Protects a friendly target, causing any damage taken to heal the target for 32,204 every 2 seconds for 6 seconds. It's a 30-second cooldown. That'd be good if it was spammable, or at least a 10-second cooldown, maybe a 15 max. But 30-second cooldowns is just not going to be worth it, and it is fairly expensive. 8.8k mana. That's a Swiftmend, and yeah, it's too much mana, Third tier, Fairy Swarm, Mass Entanglement, Typhoon. None of those are very useful at all. Really, here, just take whatever you want. I don't know what you can use for healing PvE, situational healing, It's just not too happy with that, Your 60 tier 4 talents, Incarnation, Soul of the Forest, and Force of Nature. I do roll with Incarnation. Force of Nature, it's just not gonna really help you out that much. And Soul of the Forest, it could. You could Swiftmend and use Healing Touch, and that really only would it be good for, dropping those big heals. But every time you Swiftmend, you're not really gonna have to use a Healing Touch, unless you want to use it for a Nourish, which that wouldn't make much sense at all, because Nourish is just a small heal filler. Incarnation is your big tree form. I'll show it to you right here. Your tree right here. Obviously, the best dance in the game. Yeah, well, it increases your armor by 120%. Not going to really help much in PvE. PvP, yes, it will help. And it increases all of your healing done by 15%. But what really makes it great is you can spam Life Bloom on as many targets as you want. Wild Growth, Regrowth, it enhances all of them. It's just great all around spell. 3-minute cooldown. So that means it's going to line up with Nature's Vigil, Tranquility, all those spells. And as soon as you finish it, if you need to, you can Innervate, because that's also on a 3-minute cooldown. Level 75, Tier 5, Talents, Disorienting Roar, Ursul's Vortex, and Mighty Bash. It's really between Mighty Bash and Disorienting Roar, because Mighty Bash, if your tank is just not that great, you can just Mighty Bash that unit. It's taking a lot of damage, or that's giving a lot of damage, CC him. But I really like Disorienting Roar because of dungeons like Scarlet Halls, or really it's just useful in any raid situation. Disorienting Roar is going to allow you to interrupt all units within 10 yards for 3, and it's going to disorient them for 3 seconds, if they're not immune. But That's good. Um, the last talents, the big ones. You're going to want, well, you couldn't take, really it's between Heart of the Wild and Nature's Vigil. Nature's Vigil really is good. If you just hit 90 and you're not really getting that best in slot gear, Nature's Vigil is going to be your choice. Dreamland Scenarius, not really that great. No Resto Druid wants to incorporate, DPS spells in their rotation when they could be using that time to heal. But Heart of the Wilds, if you have best in slot gear, it could be better than Nature's Vigil because it's going to give you a 6% buff to your stamina, agility, and intellect, really. It's going to allow you to drop bigger heals all the time. But, like I said, it could work better in best in slot. But Nature's Vigil, I'll read this to you. And this is a 1.5 minute cooldown. So you can use this twice in the time that you have tree form. So most likely it will be off cooldown for your tree form. Increases all damage and healing done by 10% for 30 seconds. While active, all single target healing spells also damage a nearby enemy target for 25% of the healing done. And all single target damage spells and abilities also heal a friendly target for 25% of the damage done. The big part of this is increases all damage and healing done by 10% for 30 seconds. If you stack that 10% buff with your incarnation, that's 15%, 25%, it's 25% extra healing, plus your tranquility. Tranquility ticks for, in the gear that I'm in, it ticks for about, I can't really be sure. I'll have to test it, but 25% extra healing is obviously a huge amount. And when you're combining Nature's Swiftness with Healing Touch, Nature's Swiftness is going to increase that Healing Touch by 50%. So that's, 95% additional healing that you're getting. So if that Healing Touch crits, you're going to be critting for 500, maybe 500k. So next, talk about glyphs. These are the glyphs that I prefer. Rejuvenation, it's going to allow you to cast, when you cast Rejuve on 3 or more targets, the cast time of your Nourish spell is reduced by 30%. Some Resto Druids do not use Nourish, but I do. I like just always doing something, I learned that from Preacher, his Resto Druid guide. Just always be casting something because people are always going to be taking damage. And you're always going to want to be keeping your dungeon up or your raid, and it's just going to give you that haste buff. Rebirth. During a raid, if you rebirth at the wrong time, right before a nuke, that person's just going to die again. So I take Rebirth because it's going to give them 100% health, which is it's just going to help them a lot. You're not going to have to use extra mana and extra time healing them to full, And your next one, Glyph of Life Bloom. Life Bloom. Casting Life Bloom on a new target grants that target as many applications as the old target had. This effect will not occur while in Tree of Life form or when Life Bloom has less than 2 seconds remaining. This is a must-have glyph. You're gonna need to have this, swapping Life Blooms between tanks while you're raiding. Or even in a dungeon, if someone else is taking a lot of damage, the tank loses aggro, you're going to want to switch those life blooms, Treant, I'm a Worgen. I hate being a Worgen, so I like being a tree. Glyph of the Stag. Your travel form can now be used with 2 people, and Glyph of Aquatic form, 50% faster. That's really just utility. You could actually trade out Rebirth or Rejuve if you don't use Nourish spells. You could trade that with perhaps Glyph of Healing Touch, Blooming, maybe. But other than that, there's not that many options. Wild Growth is actually very good for raids as well. 1 additional target The cooldown factor, that's not that bad. It increases its cooldown by 2 seconds. That's one extra person that you're gonna have wild growth on, and that's very good. You know, just more AoE healing. Next, I'm going to talk about stat priority. For stat priority, obviously you're a healer. Your number one stat will be spirit. You're gonna want to stack as much spirit as you can. If you're not having mana issues, I mean, go for intellect. You know, intellect gives you spell power, and the more intellect, the bigger heals you're gonna be dropping on your team. But before it's going to spirit, intellect, and then you're going to want to go for your haste breakpoint. As a Resto Druid, you're going to need 3,043 haste rating from your gear. When you reach 3,043 haste rating, it's going to allow you to get one extra tick on your Tranquility, Rejuve, Wild Growth, and Life Bloom. Your Life Bloom actually receives 2 extra ticks. So that is definitely a huge plus. More healing, you know. Once you get your breakpoint, you're gonna want to get mastery, because mastery is gonna buff your well, I was gonna say mastery is gonna buff your mastery. No, your harmony, which is the mastery for Resto Druids. It increases your periodic healing by 14%. So the more mastery you have, the more periodic healing you're gonna be having. So, obviously, while you're raiding or doing dungeons, you're always going to need to have this buff up. Huge amount. It's just going to add to your Life Bloom, Wild Growth, all your hots. Your worst stat is crit. You're going to want to reforge all your crit to either Spirit or Mastery once you reach your haste breakpoint. As you can see, I do have some PvP gear. I do not have the best gear, but I can heal perfectly fine, because I do have, you know, I'm a good healer. I do have good strategies and all that. I do need to get rid of this PvP gear, but I haven't been very lucky. I've been running heroics for a while, and I just can't get it. So, but I have reforged my, let me find my haste. Haste, I have reforged fairly close to 3,043. So I do get that extra tick. Next, let's see. Alright, next I'm going to talk about gems and enchants. So you are going to want a gem for as much spirit as you can. So for your helmet gem, your meta, you're going to want to go with Revitalizing Primal Diamonds. It's going to give you 432 spirit and 3% increased critical effects. So when you do macro your nature swiftness and your healing touch, you're going to get 3% more healing from that in every spell. The other choice you could go with, if you're fine on spirit, you're fine on mana, you could go with plus 216 intellect and 3% increased critical effect. I do prefer Revitalizing Primal Diamond, though. You can never have enough mana. For your red gems, your prismatics, you're going to get, or no, for your prismatics, you're going to want it, you could either use a yellow gem or a red one. I do prefer the red one if you already have your haste breakpoint. The red one is the Brilliant Primordial Ruby, is going to give you plus 160 intellect. And the yellow one is going to give you plus 320 haste. But if you are trying to go for your second haste breakpoint, the one that gives you even more ticks, you need over 6k, which is ridiculous. I think it can be achieved with best in slot gear, but you're definitely going to need to use that yellow socket. For your blue gems, you can go with Sparkling River's Heart or Purified Imperial Amethyst. Sparkling River's Heart is just plus 320 spirit, and Purified Imperial Amethyst is plus 80 intellect and plus 160 spirit. You know, it's really up to you and how your gear is. For red, I do prefer Purified Imperial Amethyst. It does match a red socket, and it gives you plus 80 intellect and plus 60 spirit. And the other option is the Brilliant Primordial Ruby plus 160 intellect. For your yellow gems, I would, like I said, if you're trying to reach your second haste breakpoint, you're gonna want to go with Reckless Vermilion Onyx. But otherwise, if you already have your first haste breakpoint, 3043, which is really all you need unless you have best in slot gear, you're gonna want to go with Artful Vermilion Onyx, which is plus 80 intellect and plus 160 mastery. For your enchants, go with the Greater Crane Wing inscription. Permanently adds 200 intellect and 100 critical strike to a shoulder slot item. Those are for your shoulders. For your cloak, superior intellect, chest, I do recommend Mighty Spirit, like I said. Or the other option is Glorious Stats, which increases all your stats by 80. But like I said, I do prefer Mighty Spirit, which is plus 200 spirit. For your bracers, super intellect, plus 180 intellect. Gloves, you can either go with haste or mastery. The haste is, there's really no need for haste unless you're going for your second haste breakpoint, So I do prefer the superior mastery. Belt buckle, Living Steel belt buckle is going to add a socket to your belt buckle, so that's the enchant that you're going to need to use. Legs, Greater Pearlescent Spell Thread. I'm not sure if I said that right. It increases your intellect by 285 and spirit by 165. So obviously this is a very important enchant. It's going to give you a lot of stats boost. For your boots, Pandaren Step, it's just going to slightly increase your movement speed. It's going to add 140 mastery. It's going to buff that harmony for you. Main hand weapon, Jade Spirit. Typical spellcasting class. Offhand, Major Intellect, or if you're using a two-handed, it's still Jade Spirit. Profession, this isn't really extremely important, but I do have Enchanting and Jewel Crafting. That doesn't really give me anything as a stat boost, but let's see. I'm not gonna even read those right now. Obviously, I already went over the talent and glyphs. And for your rotation, this is the most important part of being a Resto Druid. Your rotation is everything. You can have basic gear, just the lowest item level you can have to get into a dungeon, and you are still going to be able to heal that dungeon. Because your rotation and managing your cooldowns is everything as a healer, because healing is extremely situational, So obviously as a Resto Druid, your hots are most of your healing. So as you're healing a tank, you're going to want to, just set him as focus. You're going to want to have Life Bloom, 3 stacks of Life Bloom on him at all times. Rejuve, if he's taking extra damage, I'd like to just keep it on him all the time. Swift Mend, it's a AoE heal. For your direct heals, when you're filling in, just cast that Nourish, because you're always going to want to be keeping your group up, because people are always taking damage. Healing Touch is your big heal. So, see, that just hit 65k. No crit. Let's just see if we can get a crit here. Yeah, 127 crit, no cooldowns, So obviously that's a huge heal. When your tank is almost dead, you're definitely going to want to use that. And if you don't have any time to cast it, you can macro that with Nature Swiftness. Just, 97k, not even a crit. Just huge healing. Regrowth, emergency heals, for the group. It has a 60% chance to crit. Most of the time it is a crit. I'm not really getting a lot of crits here. Yeah, see, most of the time it does crit. You're always going to want to have your Harmony. Harmony is always going to have to be up. Never let that fall off. Alright, so for your clear casting procs, here, let me see if I can get one right here. Let's see. No, it won't give me one. But I'll read this to you right here. Clear casting is really, really nice. Your periodic healing from Life Bloom has a 4% chance to cause you to enter a clear casting state. The clear casting state reduces the mana, rage, or energy cost of your next cast time, damaging, or healing spell or offensive feral ability by 100%. Does not affect Nourish. So when you get this proc, I don't know, I can't get it right now, of course. But when you get this proc, most of the time you're always going to be wanting dropping them on Healing Touch, because Healing Touch is your biggest heal. And it is very expensive, you know. So getting that heal for free is extremely important, you know. Your AoE rotation, pretty much, I keep-minded my Wild Growth to 2, but this is your huge group heal right here. Healing 990 every 0.93 seconds. Oh, here's a clear casting proc. Just press F. Healing Touch. See, my mana did not go down. It's still 300k. And if you are in a raid or a dungeon, you know, most of the time you're gonna wanna. I was just in a battleground, so I don't have these key-minded. But you're gonna want to drop your mushrooms before the fight starts. You know, because your mushrooms are going to give you AoE healing, which you're going to need, you know, especially for raid fights. If you don't drop your mushrooms preemptively, like, say, Mogushon Volts, the boss who does, God, what is that called? Earthquake? Or, no, Epicenter. The boss that does Epicenter, you're going to want to pop your mushrooms, you know, so you can get a ton of healing off. So, as you can see, my mushrooms went off. It is gonna, she's gonna ton of AoE healing, which you're really gonna need. So here are your cooldowns. You have Nature Swiftness, which you can use with Healing Touch or Rebirth. You know, you could use it with Rebirth, but Healing Touch is pretty much your go-to when you're using Nature Swiftness. Incarnation, Tree of Life, and Nature's Vigil are your other big cooldowns. They're gonna line up perfectly if you use them right. Tree of Life is really for burst healing. You just spam Wild Growth and Life Bloom. And Nature's Vigil, you can pretty much just macro it with Tree of Life every time, but you do not have to use them together, of course. Other cooldowns, Enervate, Ironbark, Rebirth, Symbiosis, and Tranquility. Tranquility is your huge group heal. You're going to want to use this during raids as soon as it's off cooldown. When the raid takes a big nuke, you're going to want to use this. It is just your massive heal. You know, combining that, as I said earlier, with Nature's Vigil and Incarnation Tree of Life is just going to give you humongous healing. Symbiosis, I do prefer Symbiosis. I do prefer using it on a priest. I do love Leap of Faith. Great to troll with. So now, let me see here. Yeah, you're just gonna, well, there's not really that much else to talk about. Let me see. Specialization. Yeah, well, that's pretty much it. Let me see, just make sure I'm not missing anything. Alright, well, that was the Resto Druid guide. I'll probably upload a second video of me healing a heroic dungeon or a raid. You know, a heroic dungeon or a raid, I'll upload a second video. Yeah, just showing you the cooldown and everything. So, this was my first YouTube video. Have